Welcome to our second IMTC webinar. It's the second in a series of new webinars. We were starting with WebRTC, and today I proudly present a great set of speakers and an even more outstanding set of topics. I think it's an unbelievable great opportunity for us to see when collaboration and the Internet of Things are crossing each other's pathway. When such important streams are getting together, we can expect something unbelievable happening, new ideas, new innovations will get out, and today we get a glance of what could happen. As I said, we have outstanding great speakers. The first one is Zeus Caravala. He is going to talk about the marriage of UC and IoT and getting a better understanding. The second speaker will be Damodar Panigrahi, and he is talking about how IoT is going to interact with big data analytics and what we can get out of it. And then last but not least, Carl Ford is going to talk about the IoT Enterprise, about big data and a short vision where we in the industry are heading towards to. Having that said, we will keep questions towards the end. At the end, everybody will be able to ask questions, either to ask for better understanding of certain topics or to come up with ideas. And we hopefully can spend certain time in discussing those things. With that, I would like to turn it over to Zeus. Take it away from here, Zeus.
And thanks, Jan, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining us in this webinar. I think it's a really interesting thing to talk about. I think the UC and IoT markets have tracked along parallel paths now for a little while, but we are starting to see them come together, and I'll go through some of the market trends and explain why I think that. But I'm really looking forward to the session. I think it's a very, very exciting topic. First, a little bit of background on myself. I've been an industry analyst now for about 16 years. I was in IT before that. I think I wrote my first UC report in 2001, and I know I wasn't the first person to use that term, so I've been covering it for quite some time. And I think I wrote my first IoT report when it was called M2M, maybe in the mid-2000s. So these are two topics that have been around a long time, and I think they finally matured, and now we're seeing the coming together as a way to really change the way businesses operate. And I think that's some of the really exciting thing in this digital era. Organizations are going to compete on how they interact with their customers and how they interact with their workers, and the combination of the two is very, very powerful. Now, with respect to IoT, as I mentioned, it's been a long road to get here. The topic of IoT has been around forever. It was called M2M for years, and it seems like just recently we started calling it IoT. And it's not. I think one of the mistakes people make with IoT is it's not just the connected device itself. A connected device isn't IoT per se, it's just a connected device. But when you connect the device and you add in, change processes, add in data, do your analytics and include people, that to me is Internet of Things. So it's changing the way that we work and the way we learn and the way we live. It's not simply just connecting a device. Now, what's the Internet of Things going to do for us? I've seen estimates from a number of different firms that have stated that the economic value of IoT is anywhere between 10 trillion, I think 30 trillion is the high number I've seen on it. And in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter, right? When we're talking about trillions of dollars, the actual number itself doesn't matter. It's really big. And it's a little bit like if you would ask somebody in the early 90s to tell us how big the internet was, right? Nobody really knew what the value was going to be. And frankly, it doesn't matter because it's embedded into everything we do. And I think the Internet of Things is going to be that way, where it becomes largely integrated into everything we do. So, we don't have internet conferences today, but we did at one time. We have Internet of Things conferences today, but we won't in a few years because it'll become embedded in the fabric of everything we do. Now, some examples of IoT, here's, there's a number that are both consumer, business. Connected homes has become much more popular. I think Google and Amazon have been really driving that. Wearable technologies become huge. And again, here's an example of how the Internet of Things experience isn't just a connected device, right? So if you wear a Fitbit or one of the health monitors, that itself is interesting. It's just a connected device. But when you look at the portals they've built to help you track your exercise and monitor what you do and make recommendations and give you new insights, that to me is the IoT experience, albeit from a consumer element. Industrial IoT has probably been one of the biggest adopters of IoT, and that's manufacturing organizations and oil and gas and traditional heavy industrial organizations connecting things, connecting everything. And so, the Rio Tinto, mine in Australia has automated the movement of all their trucks going in and out of the mines. Up in the Nordic areas, where it's too cold often to get out the pipelines, you can read those things remotely now. And so industrial IoT has been a big, maybe the biggest driver, and it's going to continue to change that vertical. Smart cities, there's a ton of smart cities today. Dubai, Berlin, Chicago, there's all over the globe, cities are looking to connect more and more of their parking meters, lights, trash cans, buses, trains, things like that to improve the citizen experience and also make things safer. Connected cars, of course, Tesla's made that popular, but it's becoming a much bigger deal. And then, of course, there's retail engagement. So retailers using IoT to change the way they deal with customers. There's a retailer in New York called Rebecca Minkoff that's put up digital mirrors. They have all the clothes tagged, and if you Google that, it's a pretty fascinating case study. People can actually shop for things through the mirror itself, buy things, and then when they've picked their items, they can pick them up on their way out. So these are just some of the use cases. I would say, there's also healthcare, education. There's almost no vertical that's immune to IoT. Now, from understanding the impact of this, right? Think about the number of devices that are being connected, right? So my research shows that I estimate there's going to be about 50 billion endpoints connected by the end of 2020. Every one of these computing waves that we've gone through, though, has largely changed the way we live, right? So when we went from fixed computing to portable computing, that's being able to take laptops with us and true mobile computing. Think of how different our lives are today than they were before, and IoT is going to have the same impact. And I fundamentally believe it will change the way we work and the way we live. And again, we think about it as being sort of an unusual thing, but it's not. It's becoming part of what we do. Now, the UC market itself, as I mentioned, has been around a long time. I wrote my first report on that 15 years ago now, but it's in transition too. It's interesting to see how it's evolved. It's historically been very individual-centric, so it was focused on me, the individual, my contact list, who I want to communicate with. Now it's much more focused on agile teams. In fact, there's been a rise of these tools like Unify Circuit and Slack and HipChat and things like that allow organizations, agile teams, to be able to get together virtually very quickly, work on certain tasks, then break apart and move on to the next task. So legacy UT, you see, when you think about it, was very, very internally focused, and I think digital organizations today are trying to use it more for customer-facing applications and customer-facing purposes. It's been one of the reasons we've seen the rise of video. If you can put up a video kiosk in a retailer for expert services or remote kiosks, things like that, you can significantly change the way businesses interact with customers. I think UC enables the new UC, the one designed for agile teams, can let businesses move very quickly and compete in the digital era and understand in the digital era, if you were following the news from the World Economic Forum, I think it was Dan Schulman from PayPal who said that the speed, the new currency of business is speed, right? So in the digital era, we compete on speed. And actually, Mark Benioff from Salesforce stated that the only thing that holds the biggest impediment for an organization's future success is its past success. And that just shows that we need to think differently, we need to act differently, we need to deal with our customers and our workers differently. And UC plays a big role in that. Now, one of the ways UC has changed is largely moved away from being on-prem and into the cloud. And that's given companies a lot more flexibility of how they deploy. To me, the cloud and mobility are inherently tied together. Most organizations I talk to today want to be mobile first, and if that's the case, then they also need to be cloud first. And that has been one of the big evolutionary steps in UC. Now, as I mentioned, it's moving more to team collaboration, and what that means is we're bringing together conferencing tools, traditional collaborative tools, social tools, and enterprise UC, and bringing those together and creating a new market called team collaboration, or I was calling it workstream centric communications for a while. But the idea is that instead of sorting things and trying to manage our communications either by the individual or chronologically, we can do it now by workstream. So if I'm working on a certain project with 5 other people, I can focus on those tasks specifically related to that project through and sort of by that work stream. I can then move on to another work stream that perhaps is another set of tasks. Now, these communications today are persistent, right? So I can send, for instance, Jan, who introduced me, I could send him a message when he's offline. He could see it later. Again, with traditional UC, things were very well, they weren't persistent at all. And so if somebody wasn't online, you really had no way of getting a hold of them. I mentioned mobile and cloud first already. Team collaboration today is ideally suited for the agile worker that needs to make fast decisions. And there's more of those in the workplace. It's workers that need to bounce around from project to project, that have heavily relied on email in the past and frankly been frustrated by it. These team collaboration tools are ideally suited to that. They're also, they address both the internal and external audience, and again, understand how important that is in the digital era where competitive advantage is going to be based on how we deal with our customers. The use is very, very easy and the learning curve is low, and that's really been maybe the biggest innovation in UC in the last 15, 20 years. Now, to understand the intersection of IoT and UC, just think of it from a very high-level perspective that UC was designed to allow people to talk to people, so people-to-people communications. The Internet of Things, as I mentioned before, was really driven by something called machine-to-machine, and so IoT has largely been used for devices to talk to other devices. If we combine the two, what do we get? Well, we get the ability for machines to talk to people and people to talk to machines, and so we can automate a lot of things we couldn't do before. Now we can get more feedback from the devices we use, and it's from a very high-level perspective, it may seem kind of basic, but it has a very profound impact on the way we do things. So, for example, I've got a handful of them here. Instead of medical devices alerting other medical devices, what if the medical device could automatically alert a clinician? Right, or several clinicians, and then instead of having that process have to be very serial, now it can be something that a group can look at and then decide how to take action. Understand today, in whatever vertical you're in, there are always a number of processes with a tremendous amount of what I call human latency, and that is the latency created from people having to relay information to other people. In this example with the clinician, the information can be relayed to a number of people automatically. The top right example is, think of a managed copier service, right? There's probably nothing more boring or mundane than a managed copier service, and you think, well, how can this apply to that? Well, typically what happens is a technician would have to actually go through and touch every copier first, decide what kind of maintenance is needed, and then be able to go back down to his truck and then get all of the supplies needed to maintain those copiers. Well, what if in advance the copiers could talk directly to the technician, and when the technician pulls up to the building, all the copiers send information on diagnostic information on what toner they're low on, what maintenance is required, and now the technician can take only the equipment needed for those specific copiers, saving a tremendous amount of time versus having to run up and down between different floors and different use cases. So that's another case. Another one would be, and this is a little more consumer oriented. Well, and this is where we have a combination of talking to machines and people. Let's say you buy a connected refrigerator, and then all of a sudden the water filter needs to be replaced. Well, the water filter could actually automatically trigger a message back to a warehouse to then ship that water filter to the individual directly. Once the item is shipped, the system could then alert the consumer either through a text message or one of these team collaboration tools that your product is on the way and here's instructions on how to install it. Once it's arrived at the house, Of course, through tracking information, the manufacturer would know that, and they could send directions, maybe graphical directions or a YouTube video or something like that on how to do that. If you want to extend the analogy further, it's not unlikely, right, that the person could then throw their Oculus or HoloLens on or something like that from a VR standpoint, be able to look at the refrigerator through VR and then get step-by-step directions virtually on how to change that. Right, so think of all the implications from automotive to all the things in your home, to simple maintenance. Right, the ability for a device to be able to talk to a company and to a consumer at the same time completely changes the paradigm. Right, this is a case where perhaps the consumer would have been very frustrated in the past, not knowing how to do something, not knowing where to order the parts from, then having to wait, and that would create a big lag in being able to use that device. Now these things can happen almost instantaneously, and in fact, if done correctly, it can help companies move to more of a proactive notification model in the way they deal with their customers and the way they deal with workers. And so there's a number of different examples. I can go on and on about there's examples of in the digital ceilings and connected buildings as well, being able to automatically change air temperature and make things comfortable. I'll give you another example that incorporates team collaboration. Let's take a typical factory, right? So in a factory, obviously all the robots and all the machines there need to work harmoniously in order to make a process work. Well, what if at night, when certain equipment fails, messages are sent to the team collaboration tool as to exactly what failed or what the status of these devices are. Now, let's say you're responsible for a certain set of factory equipment, maybe some presses or something like that. Well, if those are the devices that are that have failed, the messages could be sent into this team collaboration tool, alerting you to exactly what those are. You would then be invited to that session because you're the responsible person, and so all the key people would be notified. In fact, if it's a critical failure, a conference call could actually be set up at the same time. And so when everybody came in the morning, the call could start automatically, and everybody would have the right information to be able to troubleshoot that problem. Now, juxtapose that with the traditional model of, oh, you come in the morning, I'll do my checks. Now at 10 o'clock, I have some idea of what's failed. Let me go round up all the people to figure out who's available and who's not. And then we can start maybe the collaborative process of how to solve it at noon. So, by being able to automate this factory would have saved themselves, the better part of half a day. And so again, understand the process is the machines can automatically send messages to the UC tools. The UC tools can understand which of the responsible people are that need to be notified. It can automatically set up a session like this, or a video conference, an audio conference, whatever the appropriate session is, and then a collaborative session can be established with the right people to be able to solve that problem. And so, again, think of competitive advantages being able to make the best decision in as short a time as possible with the right information. And you can do that when you bring together IoT and UC. So this is my last slide, and then I'll turn it back over to Jan. But in summary, I just want to say, the IoT era is here. We're going to see billions of devices connected over the next few years. Sensors, I'm already starting to see a tremendous amount of sensors deployed all over the place. UC is also evolving as well to team collaboration tools, and I think the combination of UC and IoT has tremendous potential to change processes, to remove human latency, and redefine customer service and automate manual processes. And again, in this digital era, right, companies that understand how to do this can leapfrog their competition. There's one that don't, I think they're going to struggle to survive. In fact, my data shows that in the next 10 years, we're going to see 75% of the S&P 500 turnover. So be proactive with this. You want to be on the forefront of bringing these two technologies together, because it has very profound implications on how we deal with workers and deal with customers. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll be back a little later for some Q&A.
Thank you, Sios. I'm excited. I have to say, I'm really excited. Great use cases, great examples. By the way, one thing which probably keeps me now up at night is one thing. I can't get it out of my head. So what if a machine is going to better understand me in the future than, for instance, a colleague sitting right beside me or my wife at home? Oh, I can't even think about what's going to happen. Definitely
Yeah,
what's needed.
actually, Jan, one way I've always described it is if you had, just from a very high level perspective, everybody had a personal assistant, maybe we wouldn't need this, right? But we don't.
Yeah.
And you know, it's very frustrating for the people that we deal with to try and figure out who we are, where we are, who the right person is to contact. If we can bring these together, now in effect we can give everybody their own, you know, virtual assistant, and you know, cut down on the amount of time it takes people to find other people they want to collaborate with, you know, properly. So.
Yeah. And one thing which is definitely needed for that, of course, we need to be able to handle the data and we need to analyze, right? Because if you want to come up with personal assistants, then of course you need to assure quality, you need to assure that you get the right data to the point when you exactly need it. And that's something what's covered by our next presenter, Damodar. You are going to talk about how IoT, the Internet of Things, is going to interact with the requirements in regards to big data and how to analyze that. And please take it from here. And we might want to double check in regards to the mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Hey, Dan?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yes, my name is Damodar Panigrahi. I'm a data services solution architect at Microsoft. So I have been in this industry for more than 20 years. So I have seen the ebbs and flows and various innovations that the IT has gone through. So IoT is definitely one of the earliest item that has took place about a decade ago, as you mentioned. So we would talk about why the IoT, you know, is in a state, what's out there. So we're going to talk about detail. So I have been in the cloud industry for more than 7 years now. So to build upon the story that Geos has started on, so why now? Why it interest to us as a business? Why interest to our customer as business? Why now? And then we're going to talk about what's available in the marketplace now. Can we use the assets, those are available in market, to execute our projects? Which will lead to the third item, which is what are the options out there to execute an IoT project? And then we'll tie all that back up to the main topic, which is around how this IoT is related to big data and how it is related to predictive analysis. Next slide, please. Darren, can you move it? Thanks. So why now? As you have seen by this time, customers are ready. So customers in general, they are ready now than they ever been. If you think about earlier time, customers were reluctant to get in on the bandwagon of the IoT devices. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So what's next? Businesses. Well, businesses are ready too. So you have seen numerous cases where businesses are doing something to their business to stay proactive, to do their business workflows more efficiently than ever before. And the third thing is the infrastructure itself. Now, as you folks know, to build up infrastructure takes a lot of time, a lot of OpEx, and a lot of time-consuming assets to put in place. The collaboration, as you mentioned, it's a task by itself. So right now, the cloud infrastructure is available. So diving deep a little bit on why now on the customers are ready. So if you think about it, initially from a consumer space, the biggest hurdle used to be how and why I need to share my data. What happened to my security, privacy, complaints about the data? Now, from a ready perspective, you have seen numerous use cases where customers are truly embracing the fact that their data is not exposed outside the security boundary, so the privacy is still maintained up to a good extent. So that's the reason you see that customers are embracing the IoT devices. You see bands, you see watches, you see various other devices that's encroaching the private lifestyle. Now, it's not only the individuals that the IoT devices are being used for, they are used everywhere. In a community center, yes, in the individual context, like healthcare. So right now, in the medicine business, in the healthcare business, you would see people using the IoT devices to monitor health. You would see people using the devices on the manufacturing chain as well as the distribution chain on the medicine sector. It's not only out there for individual and in the community, it's also now getting into the family side. So if you think about the car that you mentioned about Tesla is one of them, Google, Apple, they're all trying different ways to get into connected cars. But then now the IoT is also coming to refrigerator and whatnot. So we know that our TVs are already smart. Well, can we call them as an IoT devices? Well, there the infrastructure is there. So if you see the time and again, the analysis, they talk about IoTs, and here is the number. So you say that this is a survey done by 2025. Pretty much everyone is going to be using some or other kind of IoT devices. Not to say that right now it's not, but by 2025 it's the larger population. So right now, if you think about the consumers, the businesses, there is an elite group of those folks who are in the IoT business now or in the consumer side. But by 2025, you would see that IoT devices would be quite ubiquitous, and it's not only impacting the general population, but also it's going to impact all kind of devices that we can imagine. So why businesses now? Well, the businesses are ready. So, one of the paper from MIT Solon, they said that ready or not, here IoT comes. So from business perspective, you have to take the first mover advantage. The sooner the better. Of course, being in Microsoft in the area of cloud infrastructure, we have already seen how to kind of lose that insight of first mover advantage. You just mentioned a lot of examples on how businesses are truly taking advantage of this IoT scenario. I'm going to bring to your attention a couple of innovative ways how businesses solve their unique problems. So Fujitsu is a company, it's a Japanese company. They had an interesting problem to tackle, which is to solve the shortage of the food in the country. Well, how to improve that? Well, they figured out that if we can somehow make the food cycle better from a productivity perspective, maybe we can solve a little bit of problem on that side. That's precisely the deal. So they try to figure out from IoT pattern how to inject or inseminate cows at an appropriate time. Their siblings can come along and their progenies will come in lifetime, and that's how we can produce more meat. That's what they thought. Well, they are successful. So you can get to the detailed use case in the href sections mentioned out there. Now, another use case is elevator. Well, elevators, they have to run, of course, and how we can proactively keep those elevators running by collecting various metrics from the devices, the elevators, those are running all over the place. So that's precisely what Tynosoft did to solve the problem. And as we spoke about the healthcare space, Kaiser already is participating in a huge way in the IoT community. And then they also have implemented a solution to solve the responsiveness and the collaboration between the healthcare systems that they provide and various assets such as pharmaceuticals, such as doctors interacting with the patients. So as per their study, they are quite impressed by the move. They think that their investment is worth what they have mentioned. To stand up an infrastructure is a huge task. It has a capex involved in it. It has a lot of costs, other hidden costs associated with it. Now, what's the alternative? As Gartner has pointed out, pretty much everyone is looking to move to cloud in some way or other. So it's the mobile fast and cloud fast world. As you mentioned, The motto of Microsoft is, as it came out from our CEO Satya, that we are a mobile cloud first and cloud first company. So we do expect that the infrastructure will be utilized. So the infrastructure is out there for business to utilize. So why not? So as you can see from an infrastructure company perspective, we are not going to go anywhere. The business is thriving. So we had about 102% year-over-year growth. So that pretty much chimes well in alignment with the business's goal. So we are not going to go anywhere. So your CapEx is not going to go anywhere. Your model is going to change into OpEx, but however, the infrastructure is available. So for you as a business, there is nothing stops you to adapt to this IoT world. So what's available now? Well, we talked about why now from a customer perspective, from a business perspective, from infrastructure availability perspective. Now, it's not only the infrastructure itself, but also the software elements to it. The challenges, those are pretty much already identified as patents. They are all published in the market. There are frameworks, those are available to implement the solution. So, for example, characteristics of IoT, right? There are various characteristics, including power consumption challenges, including secure communication, including availability of the devices. All those challenges are already identified. So as an implementer, we do not need to reinvent the wheel, but rather utilize the existing patents. Those are already discovered and well published. Similarly, we do have architectural patents and other design considerations. Those are already discovered and available. We just need to follow the recommendation and learn from others' mistakes, bank on their mistakes, and move forward with the implementation. Similarly, from infrastructure and platform services, Azure provides a host of services, including data services and Cortana Intelligence Suite. That's where the big data, the predictive analysis, the IoT scenarios kind of marry. So the suites of products can help business implement their solution in a faster way. So from an architecture perspective, Lambda architecture, it's well already an established architecture. So you would see it's implemented across the organization, across various business functions. So it is essentially utilizing the factor that data is ingested to the system at a faster rate, then is being consumed, which is usually a slower rate. And then how you are going to use different kind of models, those are used in the big data scenarios, how the IoT devices on the fly, either on a hot path or cold path, can use the data that's being produced in a gigantic fashion. So that's an architecture for you to review. So this has been already widely published and used. So again, when it comes to availability, these are something to bank on, to build our application on. So this is one other pattern is an example, as an illustration of the traits of the IoT. So this is focusing on the communication itself. So there are numerous challenges, right? Well, they are captured, but still there are numerous challenges that the business needs to overcome when they execute an IoT project. So communication is one of them. Well, shall I go for SSL or shall I go for regular HTTP? Those kind of questions are still relevant. However, the pattern hasn't been discovered, and there are solutions around it, right? The SSL communication has a 7-way of handshake that is draining the power. How you solve those problems? Now, again, those are being currently addressed to some extent. The problems has been already identified, so we can bank on them, right? So this is an example of a pattern which has already been discovered. So now, how we are going to execute an IoT project? Well, the infrastructure is available. There are 3 different models that the industry has figured out how to execute an IoT project. They are build, hybrid, and buy. Now, in build, essentially you are building from ground up. Well, if you have too much customization that's needed, that's probably your choice. The other one is hybrid, where you buy a framework from Azure or other cloud provider, and you build a solution on top of it. And the third one is completely buy off the shelf. Just like you are buying any software such as Office 365, you would buy a suite where both the framework and the solution has already built for you, and you customize for your uses. Right? Those are the three major models those are out there. So this is an example of how you can build all by yourself. So some of the challenges that I mentioned about, hey, how can I secure my data? Hey, how can I make sure that the data from the devices are reaching my server? Well, it might happen that the IoT devices in a particular corporate network, maybe they are small enough that they do not have capacity to reach out to internet, or maybe the security doesn't allow them to reach out to internet. Can we deploy some kind of gateway? Well, those kind of questions are being answered by various patents, those we have discussed, and this is how you build it. This is an example of institutions already are building on top of those patents. So what's next? Well, the connected cow. So that's about an example where IoT is injecting data in a huge proportion to what it was doing before, though they are in chunks, small chunks, which leads to a huge repository. So that's where the big data comes into picture. And then the models are developed on top of those data, those are already covered. That's where predictive analysis is coming into picture. Is this big data science? Apparently, yes. So the businesses are already using all these three elements. Now, to bank on it, why is the important factor now? Well, as you can see, the data is key to business. So some of the statistics, as you can see, amplifies that point that the big data will be a key picture in the business. It has been used in silos, but going forward, it will be used in context of IoT and predictive analysis. This is to recap that there are ample opportunities about combining these three different aspects, big data, IoT, and predictive analysis, and be successful, right? So this is a rehash of the same points that I mentioned earlier. So this is an example about a logistic company. Unlike the connected cow, they also had challenges about how they can combinedly use these three different aspects of the technology, namely IoT, big data, and predictive analysis. They did it, and they are very successful in their business. This is an example. So with that, I'm handing over back to the moderator. Thanks for your time, guys.
A couple of things come to my mind. To the past, to the history, and we see that the business administration guys were the guys managing and owning the data and bring in order to grab information and provide information. We reach a new level of transparency. And this is something which I see a lot of opportunities for us. And of course, it will be interesting how enterprises are going to adopt that. And with that, I would like to hand over to Carl, who is going to talk about the IoT Enterprise and how big data will be leveraged in that. So Carl, please take it from here.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to try to bat third and hit on the second pitch. So I'm going to try to bring us home and make it so that we get done by noon. So I'm going to be very quick on my slides. Candidly, you guys can look at them, and if you've got questions, you can find the link to them all. I'm going to say something because of the fact that it occurred to me that most of us on this phone call know each other about 20 years. And I want to remind some of us of some very key ingredients. And the first one was when the term internet telephony came about. Vince Cerf made the statement, internet telephony is roughly the same term as horseless carriage. And I bring that up because I run the IoT Evolution event. I certainly use the term IoT. I gave up M10 because of some of the problems with search terms that I don't want to get into right now. But when it comes to my Business Impact Awards and showcasing where IoT has been used, I always ask the companies that have deployed IoT, when did the customer ask for IoT? And the answer is almost always never. It's not IoT that they're looking for, it's the sensors and the data that they get from the sensors. So we did a survey with our customer base about what they are using. We had over 100 different companies talk to us about what they were doing. Only about 10% had nothing planned. We were a good mix on size of company, a good mix on applications being used, and one key ingredient is that 70% of them were using Wi-Fi or cellular. I want to remind people that mobile first almost always means Wi-Fi is included, because it just doesn't manage well otherwise. So most companies on the are you doing it to save money, make money, or comply with government, a lot of them always think that they're going to get to grow the business. A key other aspect of it is that they recognize the fact that the big data, the value that they are going to get, is going to come from data analytics. So here's the giant disconnect we have. The truth of the matter is that we are outnumbered on our analytics, and we are building so much analytics that we don't really have a good sense of it. Everybody's got different numbers. We've got lots of stuff going on with Tableau and social media connectivity into this stuff. And on average, we expect that everyone's going to have 4.3 devices around them. Here's the Steve Jobs moment here. To give you perspective on exactly how big data is on big data, it's roughly the equivalent of using an eye drop to fill up SeaWorld's major water pavilion twice. So that's how much we're talking about in terms of big data. So we're all gathering this data. We're either doing it in streams or in lakes, depending on your perspective. And the reality is that most of us don't know what we have in the way of data yet. We're not comfortable with the metrics. We're not comfortable in how we manage it. I was very impressed with Zeus's presentation talking about UC. The reality is that we've got some real issues facing us in terms of understanding how to take advantage of dashboards. We actually have another webinar going on today associated with IoT Evolution, which is talking about the issues of building better dashboards. And what we need to do is we need to understand how we communicate information properly for consumer and enterprise use. I want to get to the most important aspect of this. Next year will be the 10th year anniversary of the iPhone being deployed. I remember very distinctly being at the Security Industries Association major show, which is now now called FISMA, FMSA, and listening to CIO after CIO saying that they had talked to the Apple people and they threw them out of the office because they were never going to do what they wanted, and they were going to be loyal to BlackBerry. And invariably, they would then pull out an iPhone from their jacket, from their pocket, and show some app that they were using with their family. We are going to go through the same phenomena with IoT. Millennials and what they are teaching us about taking advantage of information and getting instant feedback is going to be what drives IoT's evolution. And whether or not you expect it to be associated with you growing growing new services or being compliant, you're going to find that you're going to have more and more people get involved. One of the major things that my parent company, Crossfire Consulting, does right now is it teaches old companies how to build new services. And one of the big things we face with large companies and the transition that Zeus was talking about, how many S&P companies we're going to disintegrate, is the fact that making the adaptation from a waterfall mentality on development to an agile workplace is going to be essential for understanding how to take advantage of IoT. IoT is always going to be an iterative experience, in my opinion. It's always going to be someplace where we're going to grow. And what's really going to make it so that it gets understood and adapted rapidly is the data visualization. So with that said, I put up the Pareto paradox, which is if you read the newspapers, you get to see all this information that talks about all the great things that consumers are doing, and it's wonderful noise. But the true value is, as GE says, making things spin better, making things move better, making it so that production improves. And the places where we're going to see real innovation is where people take advantage of IT and ops to make it so that things are instantaneously and in as near real time as possible we can do. I've got the survey, the full survey up there. I want to mention the fact that James Brem and Keith Timber were instrumental in getting the survey done. It was a wonderful survey, and we're actually building one on analytics now as we speak. Last but not least, I want to make one more point about data visualization, which is that being mobile first, you have lots of dashboard concerns about how you get things done. And I'm not sure the fact that the sensors are becoming, in effect, the processors is getting understood well. You know, you look at what Conical's doing and VMware and Intel, and we're making very smart edge devices. And it would be wrong of us to think that IoT is only about the sensor itself. I have a big fight with James on a regular basis as to whether or not Uber is an IoT device or an IoT solution or not. I would say it is, because in quite candor, its cross-elastics are with IoT things. So with that said, I'll stop, and Darren, you lead us on with questions.
Thanks, Carl. Great presentation, great insight. So when I was listening to the three of you, I think it's clear that we're going to solve, hopefully, a lot of challenges we see today in today's industry. Now, the question I have is, when talking to customers, what would be the first thing I would talk about? What biggest problem are we going to solve by blending UC communication collaboration with IoT? Maybe Sirius, you want to go ahead and come up with your point of view.
You know, I think the biggest thing to look for are processes with lots of human latency built into them, and that is, you know, where an individual has to actually go to a physical device, gather information, then try and understand what that information means, and then invite a bunch of people to a meeting to try and figure out how to solve that problem. And so I think the one horizontal use case I can think of for all companies is for, you know, when you have agile teams that need to make decisions quickly, the combination of UC and IoT can do that. Now, when you get within different verticals, that of course changes. So I think in retail, UC and IoT can significantly change the way companies deal with customers. I think in manufacturing, it can improve safety, improve uptime. I think in the healthcare industry, it can lead to better patient care. And so I think the key here is for organizations to understand really the key performance indicators that drive their business, and then apply the combination of UC and IoT to that.
Thanks a lot.
Can I add something here?
Yeah, of course. Carl, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one place I would always start is an inventory management, and there's two aspects of it. One is that to Zeus's point, you know, the more you can make it so that things happen in real time, the more value you're going to find in you know, getting to a just-in-time world. The other side of it is there are business model changes in this world, right? You know, GE's no longer really selling engines; they're selling services and thrust associated with engines. You know, this is kind of the path where we're going to find that, you know, to that point that was made earlier, we're heading towards ops being the experience rather than capital, and I think that's definitely going to be a part of it.
Okay, thanks. Great. Let us check around. Are there questions from our webinar participants? So please unmute yourself and raise your question if you have.
So just while we're doing that, Jan, maybe I have a question for, well, I think Damodar, because he mentioned security, and my question would be, what do you see as being the main barrier to adoption, and how we overcome that? Because clearly privacy and security are popping up every day, right?
Absolutely. That's probably still is the main hurdle and a challenge from not only business perspective, but also from technology perspective, right? So security in general encompasses three other, or two other elements, which is privacy and compliance, right? So we all have heard about HIPAA rules. We all heard about, European rules. So security is still a big challenge. Now, having said that, it's almost like there is no silver bullet to solve the problem. However, from a scenario perspective, certain IoT scenarios have solved these issues. So from a solution perspective, let's say that if the device is has a bit more compute power, like an watch or a phone, and then essentially using SSL addresses the security over the wire. And then on the server side, of course, we have technology since years to address that. So to answer your question, it is still one of the biggest hurdle, I would say. So from my perspective, the industry is still trying to figure it out, especially from an IoT devices perspective in the entire solution, how that's going to involve and evolve over a period of time. So it's quite an interesting problem to see how it evolves.
Yeah, it's by far I just ran a survey last year, and it 3/4 of individuals said security is the biggest challenge for IoT. It's without a doubt the biggest challenge today.
Yep.
I'm going to be a contrarian. Okay, I think that people just don't recognize the fact that they can harden the devices, but they always have to do penetration testing, and they always have to manage their network. If you actually control your network and understand how you harden systems, I think that's the baseline that you have to work with, and it's about constant vigilance. I will say that almost every penetration problem I've heard in the recent past had to do more with back-end core management than anything to do with the devices at the edge. So that's my own.
One of the challenges, though, Carl, is that IT often doesn't even know the devices are connected now, right? OT does that.
Right.
And so that process of connecting and securing and hardening it needs to become a lot more automated than it is.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, from a device perspective, certain devices can easily adapt to this new world, whereas certain devices can't. For example, if you think about an IoT device which is under $5, they simply do not have necessary power to go on a 7-way handset, right? Things like that. So
yeah.
So this is Phil Edholm. Let me ask you a question. So it strikes me that the challenge with IoT is that whilst there are a bunch of what I would call relatively smart devices, i.e. smartphones and those things, but a lot of what we're using in IoT are going to be flea-sized devices. They're going to be temperature sensors that have photovoltaic coating on them, so they're actually getting power from light in the room. It strikes me that you have to have an aggregation layer where sensors and actuators talk to an aggregation layer and don't talk to the internet in general. And the aggregation layer aggregates up that data and then presents it for applications to use it. And that's the way you're going to get the web effect. I mean, I think the biggest challenge with IoT is so much of IoT is still stovepiped. It's still client server, where an actuator, a sensor is only talking to a specific server for a specific application. So for example, a temperature sensor in an office is talking to the HVAC system, when in fact what we'd really like to be able to do is have the interactions between that and the UC system, so we can adjust temperature in the office based on the time of arrival of the person that's in the office. And so one of the things I'm curious about, because it strikes me that this is the thing that the IoT community is fundamentally failing at, is building the right kind of aggregation layer and then a way to expose that so applications can essentially attach to that aggregated data in a way to use it uniquely and provide that in standardized, restful ways with the right security, et cetera. You got any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, very good point. So if you think about it, one of the patents is the gateway patent, which addresses not only the security issue, because that now the devices do not need to talk to internet directly, so they would talk to a gateway. So in that way, the information exchange between the device and the server is less exposed to internet. So there is a well-known patent, right? The gateway patent that addresses this issue. I believe that going forward, the devices, more and more devices, especially the edge devices, which has less power or less compute, would keep on following that. So in a way, the pattern already exists, and I still expect it to evolve over time.
On that point, can I ask Carl a question following up on this? Which one factor is driving the acceleration of Internet of Things? Of course, we have been talking about UC and others, but is there one single thing that you would single out?
Well, it's a market of market. So there's not one place. I honestly, inventory management keeps coming up. It also depends a lot on the vertical marketplace. You know, if you go back to one of my first slides, I showed the compliance issues, and we've got new regulation in trucking. We've got new regulation in cold chain and food safety modernization. All these things kind of lend themselves to better reporting issues. To Zeus's point, Ops is finding ways to take advantage of the technology and get the optimization they want. And there's a major disconnect in the fact that IT doesn't necessarily hear from Ops when they've gotten this improvement. And you know, the point that Phil was making, I just want to go back to Phil's point for a moment. You know, this was kind of the idea behind 1M2M, was 1M2M wanted to rapporteur with all the different vertical marketplaces, because in the end, you know, the problem that you face, Phil, is that every single industry's gone off and built technology their own way, right? I mean, you know, I remember listening to us try to convince the SCADA people that they wanted SIP, which didn't go too well, in case anyone doesn't remember. And the issue that we face is that adaptation is going to be very specific to industries. I think medical is going to be a slow starter. I think telematics has already advanced way beyond what people are capable of understanding yet, and is going to continue. I'm still not convinced that I want to buy a car from Apple, but you know, I'll shut my mouth because I didn't think I'd ever want to buy a phone from Apple either. And I'll just say that you know, I think the places where we're going to see innovation is going to continue to amaze us. I'll put it that way. With that said, you know, I pay attention to the analytics companies more than anybody else, because I think they're the place where the drivers are going to be apparent.
Thanks, Carl.
And with that said, guys, I have to run, so I want to thank everybody. I really enjoyed listening to the presentation, and look forward to, you know, working with you guys in the future.
So just checking with you, there might be a couple of further questions if everybody still has time and would like to continue. When we look to the history of communication and collaboration, at the beginning it was all about features and functionalities, and the vendor who had the most features was most respected. Later on, it was all about experience, user experience, and how easy it is to use the solution. Then we got into the people working together with people, so it's about team and how people are interacting with each other. Now, what can we expect from the Internet of Things? What will be the impact? And the most exciting thing, probably, what will change in collaboration now incorporating elements from the Internet of Things?
Well, I think the integration of UC into other applications and other tools, right? I think, as you mentioned before, it was really based on, leadership was based on who had the most features, but the other side of that, it was who had the most proprietary features. And I fundamentally believe that, you know, workers don't want more, you know, apps on their desktop. What they want is more communications capability built into the apps they already use, or the systems they already use. And so I think what we can expect to see is greater innovation that way, where we see much more standards-based systems where the solutions become the communications. I guess maybe the best way to think about it is, you think of the evolution of communications. We went from a PBX to an IP PBX, and we took that IP PBX and pushed it into the cloud, right? Still a vertically integrated system. Now what we're seeing is UC become much more modularized. So now you can deliver, collaboration capabilities in whatever process or application that we want, very, very quickly. And I think that's probably been one of the more interesting things to watch.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for your time. I think we're going to wrap it now because we're a little over. So just time to thank everyone on behalf of Manny and myself, our audience for joining, whether live or whether you're viewing it again from the recording, our fantastic presenters for giving their time and their insights, our moderator Jan, who I know suffered some terrible network problems during the recording. I will make this slide deck available so that you have all of our contact details, web, mail, Twitter, etc. And I'm sure we'd love to hear your feedback, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us for further information, either on the IMTC or the activity group, or just to speak with us about collaboration and IoT. So with that, once again, thank you everyone. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll push the content out very soon.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye now.